Hey, power people. Welcome to Renewable Rides, powered by VECKTA. I'm Gareth Evans, the CEO and founder.
And I'm Dan Roberts, head of sales. In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, learnings, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition, on-site energy, and sustainability through the experiences of our inspiring guests and team here at VECKTA.
So get ready for an exhilarating adventure into the fast-paced world of challenging limits, adapting purposefully, and empowering co-creation to accelerate the energy transition with those that are on a mission to create a more resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future. So let's go. All right, Renewable Ride followers. We are excited today, Dan and I, to be joined by Isaac Vanderburg and Matt Nejati from Launch Alaska. And we're going to talk about the EnergyShed project and lots of other cool and exciting happenings in Alaska. But welcome, Isaac, Matt. Great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Cool. Well, we'd love to start with who are you? Where are you based? What do you do? Where do you come from? And ideally, what are you passionate about inside and outside of work? Isaac, do you want to start?
Yeah, great. Again, thanks for the invite to be here. We're excited to talk to you all today. My name is Isaac Vanderburg, CEO of Launch Alaska, and a little bit passions in and out of work. I guess it kind of depends on the season in Alaska, but I'm beekeeper and gardener in the summer, a lot of skiing in the winter of all types, Nordic, downhill, cross country, so on and so forth. But yeah, kind of go with the seasons, and then also mostly spending time with my kiddos and doing what they tell me to do. So yeah, but happy to be here.
Right on. And my name is Matt Nejati. I work with a few different organizations, but a big part of my work is supporting launch and deploying clean energy tech around Alaska. I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and have known at least you, Gareth, for a number of years now. And so it's exciting to be here on the podcast. What gets me fired up professionally, it's working in rural and off-grid energy projects and microgrids. And it's a huge part of why working with Launch is so exciting and why working on this EnergyShed project is so phenomenal, and getting to see kind of the impact and what you can get done in these remote communities with some really amazing tech is phenomenal. But also that there's a lot of professional pride in it, and it makes me happy with what I do. Personally, I love food. I love to cook. I love to explore restaurants and recipes. I think the last time you called me, Gareth, I ignored your call because I was emulsifying eggs. If you look in the fridge, there's chicken brining and pickles and syrups and sauces and all sorts of things in containers everywhere. But yeah, I love to think about food and eat.
You're making me hungry. What's your favorite cuisine?
Ooh, good question. I don't know if it's my favorite. We've been cooking a lot of Korean food at home lately, which is certainly my wife's favorite, so that works out nicely. But yeah, not picky, very open to trying a wide variety of stuff.
What's the delicacy in Alaska, Isaac?
I mean, anything that comes out of the ocean, we're well known for, but maybe a little less well known is the carrots that come out of the valley. The carrots we have here are massive and sweet, and you wouldn't think that you'd have people that are passionate about carrots, but they're incredible carrots, and you can only get them, kind of summer and for a few months after summer when they're stored well. But carrots are incredible.
Did not know that. Yeah, that's a good learning already on the podcast. Matt, we'll be sure to hit you up when we come to Toronto as well to do a bit of a food tour with you.
Always.
Maybe one of the stops is your own kitchen as well.
That's also a valid option. We're always very welcoming. Anytime you want to stop by, you guys are of course welcome.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, before we get into the EnergyShed program, you've mentioned a couple times Launch Alaska. Isaac, maybe you can tell us a little bit about Launch Alaska. What is it? How did it come about? How are you inspired? And really, what's the mission?
Yeah, sure. So Launch Alaska is a nonprofit organization. We are a climate tech deployment accelerator. based out of Anchorage, Alaska. And we have a mission of accelerating the energy transition in Alaska. So what that means is looking for ways to decarbonize energy, industrial, and transportation systems in the state. And the way we do this in Alaska is through two main programs. One is our tech deployment track, which is this 8-month deployment accelerator where we attract companies from anywhere in the world, including, I think VECKTA went through our program, of course. And we try to connect them to asset owners in Alaska. So ports, airports, municipalities, utilities, and essentially try to find projects for those companies to deploy their tech and so that they can perform in a real world environment like Alaska. And then the other main part of what we do is our deploy team works with some of those same asset owners, ports, airports, utilities, et cetera, and works with them to source innovation and get unstuck on some of their own decarbonization projects. So I think it's an Alaska term, but getting projects off of high center, projects that have just kind of stalled for whatever reason. We have this team of folks, of which Matt is a part, where we help them get rolling and get moving. We also have other programs, all focused on deploying climate tech. But we work on some policy and advocacy work. We've done some investing in the past and raised our own investment funds to invest in some of the companies that we work with. We have a large focus on impact reporting and kind of tracking the work that we do so that it can be measured and replicated and expanded. But yeah, it's an organization that I think the key word for us is deploy. The thing that unites everything that we're doing is just trying to deploy the technology that's ready to go. It's looking for customers. Alaska is this incredible proving ground and deployment ground where we have just a lot of needs for the kinds of technologies that the climate tech companies are offering, and it's a good place for companies to show that they can perform.
Amazing. How was the idea inspired, Isaac? Like, what was the catalyst?
Yeah, it's interesting. In the early years, we were really just focused on startup activity and looking at ways to encourage more startups working in the state. I was on the board the first year during the founding year and it kind of helped get it going. But after the first year, I think the organization said, it was basically volunteer run. It was kind of a beta, an early prototype. And we all said, we have day jobs and we need to go back to our day jobs. We're not sure we can volunteer for an organization for another year. And right around that time, we got some essentially essential seed funding from the Office of Naval Research to actually hire a little bit of full-time staff. And when I came on board, really at the beginning of that second year, the vision that I had was really focused on climate. I saw a really exciting role for Alaska to play in deploying climate tech. And I think over the years, we've transitioned from being really focused on startups and working with the founder and more of the kind of Techstars Y Combinator model to really seeing our niche as projects and deploying. I think if you're a startup anywhere in the world, there's huge ecosystems in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Austin, Boston, other kind of tech hubs throughout the world where you're probably better served as an early stage entrepreneur just trying to get your company up and running. But when you're ready to go to market and you're looking for a project, I think Alaska has a really interesting kind of value proposition. And so that's why over the last 5 or 6 years, we've increasingly focused on projects. We're solving, there's this kind of chicken or egg problem that startups have where they need to show that they have revenue before they can raise rounds to grow, but they need to raise rounds before they can have products that can actually help them get revenue. And we're solving, I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg part of that, but essentially the revenue traction, deploying tech side of that. And that's really what we've built a whole organization around.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that was definitely the attraction for us. We are firmly aligned on the deployment side. Our North Star is actually megawatts deployed because we completely agree that until assets are in the ground and actually creating value, then everything before it is, an enabling piece of that, because it actually doesn't save money or provide resilience or reduce emissions if it's a report or a glossy PowerPoint presentation. Like, we actually need to get these assets built. And so that was a massive attraction for us. And we love the community you're building. And it's amazing, isn't it, Matt? You touched on this before, that we've known each other for many years. Like, this is a fairly young industry, and it's still not a massive industry. I think it's still a small community of people who are passionate about it and making an impact. And we're excited to introduce you guys to Ice Thermal, one of our supplier partners who are now part of your program. And it's great being able to all make these connections together and build the ecosystem and have an impact. So love what you're doing.
It's pretty amazing that there's so many in this kind of small ecosystem you're saying, Gareth. There's so many connections between the work Launch is doing, the work you guys are doing, the work other companies you partnered with are doing, and that it all has a place in Alaska. Like, it really, I think, speaks to Isaac's point on, as a place to deploy technology, it really is amazing. And there's so much opportunity there.
Yeah. And I would just add on that focus on community. I mean, I think that's such an exciting thing that VECKTA brings, and why it's such a good partnership with you all is that, a large part of our thesis is that the technologies are ready to go, but that's only part of the solution. You need communities, you need community buy-in, you need a lot of smart people, really globally, working on these problems together. And the technology is great, but without the community side, it's just as important. And I think that's why it's been a good partnership with VECKTA. Is you all have that same vision, and you've built essentially a technology around that.
Yeah. In the spirit of deploying, we're looking at opportunities to get this out to some of the Alaskan communities through the EnergyShed program. So maybe you can spend a minute and explain the origins and primary goals of the EnergyShed program, and we'll unpack this a bit more, but let's start there.
Sure. So I think it really goes back a number of years where Department of Energy started looking at the concept of energy sheds. And they defined an energy shed as an area where the energy is locally produced to meet the needs of that area, of that region. And it had this kind of direct correlation to a watershed, where you have the collection and storage of water and various in and out flows that impact the system and the area and the region that it covers. And, when you think about the lower 48, when you think about California, this isn't a super clear-cut concept. You have this robust network of distribution and transmission, and you have regulated grid systems and markets and transactions of energy across these regions happening all the time, which means the energy that's powering your lights, or you're charging your electric vehicle, or whatever it happens to be, you don't know necessarily where that is coming from. When you look at Alaska, this is not the same, in that Alaska as a state is an isolated grid system, but then even more at a more granular level than that, there's hundreds of rural villages that consume and generate power independently and are essentially completely islanded, operating as what we call microgrids, and have been for decades this way. Most of them are producing electricity using diesel fuel and facing the extremely high costs of procuring and shipping and storing that fuel each year, resulting in high costs for the people living in these communities to spending a huge portion of monthly budgets on energy. So when DOE's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy announced this funding program around exploring place-based generation, we had this idea that looking at Alaska as a single energy shed could be really interesting, with this idea that the challenges that an individual community faces, or an individual village faces, in deploying clean energy tech is probably shared to some extent, and there's commonalities amongst them. And that if we can do some regional planning and regional development of energy generation projects, there might be an opportunity for a lot of benefit for all stakeholders. That really leads us to this goal of the project, which is to develop and deploy the tools necessary to bring an aggregated funding package made up of private and public funds for at least 3 place-based energy generation projects. We want the package to be at least $10 million, and we're working in 12 communities, 6 in Northwest Alaska and 6 in Southeast Alaska, to try to find and identify where those projects make sense.
Matt, love it. I love the vision, and I really like that watershed, energy shed. It's so transferable, isn't it? It's really an easy way to actually visualize the concept you're talking about. You mentioned Alaskan communities are heavily reliant on diesel, and as such, they're relying on some of the most expensive energy sources in the world, especially with the supply chain challenges that come with being in very remote places. How do you see EnergyShed supporting these communities and adding value to their lives? And
this is, I think you've actually hit on it there, Gareth. Like right now, if you look, there's plenty of funding dollars coming through various government sources that could potentially be making its way into these communities to fund clean energy projects. But there are hundreds of villages in Alaska, and if you look across the country, even more places where potentially the dollars aren't making it exactly there. And if they are, it's public dollars. And if we think about our communities that we're focusing on with EnergyShed, they range from a couple of hundred people to a few thousand people. They are very small, and this is not the kind of place which is going to attract private funding in most cases and private investment. And so the idea behind EnergyShed was, if we could aggregate projects together and leverage common resources, then maybe we can attract private capital to places where otherwise it would not be going. Like the average clean energy investor is not interested in the super small nameplate ratings, what tends to be a slightly higher cost per unit kind of project, and relatively small capital outlays. But maybe by aggregating and having a platform that enables this visibility and transparency, we can start to bring in funds to places, different sorts of funds to places that are not otherwise seeing that those dollars get in there. And that's what we're really excited about. That's the impact.
And I would just add on, I think the exciting thing about trying to bring in private capital is that, it represents scale. I think this is changing a little bit with the Inflation Reduction Act, where we're seeing some really big awards going into regions of Alaska. There was just a big award announced a couple of weeks ago for the very region where we're working in. However, historically, the amount of funding that will go to energy projects in Alaska, rural Alaska, are a couple of dozen grants each year to do some powerhouses and upgrades. But there's so much more need than that kind of funding cycle and the funding timelines and the funding amounts can provide for, that if we're able to, and it is a big if, like this is a big challenge. Success is not guaranteed in this instance. But if we are able to find a way to aggregate projects, as Matt is saying, where you can actually attract private capital, I think you could start to achieve the kind of scale and speed for getting enough energy projects done in enough areas in the state that you could start to put a real dent in the cost of energy that folks are paying. So far, we just have not been able to do that. The other thing that I'm really excited about that, private capital brings is that, whereas we've been pretty good in Alaska in the past of building things and having capital budgets to stand something up or replace a unit or a generator or something, we've not been as great about thinking about the long-term operations and maintenance. And one of the requirements, as you all know, when you have private investors involved, is that, as part of the investment, there's oftentimes a pretty strong plan for operating and maintaining those assets so that the private investor can see their cash flow over the course of 20 years or 30 years, which is really how they get paid back. And that's unique to private capital. And is a reason why I think this is a problem that's really worth trying to solve, is trying to find a way to bring in private investment so that it's a requirement of all these projects that we've thought through, not just building the thing or replacing the generator, but also how do we actually care for it over the long term so that it lasts and that the investors can get paid back.
Yeah. We'll get into the communities themselves in a minute, but it feels like Launch Alaska as an organization and your ethos around deployment is like the best organization to pursue this type of effort. And we were speaking about community before. Who all is needing to be a part of this to mobilize the private capital? It's going to require a wide variety of stakeholders coming to the table to make this a reality. Who are some of the partners that you're pulling in to make this EnergyShed program a reality?
Yeah, it's funny you say, Dan, like it seems like Launch is the perfect organization for it. I think when the notice for the program funding first came out, we actually looked at it and said, I don't think there's anything for us here. This seems like a research focused funding bucket, essentially. And I think we kind of brushed it off to some extent, and then listened and thought about it and talked internally a little bit more and said, well, maybe we have this thing. Let's throw it out and see what happens. And I think in the end, it's turned out exactly as you said. It feels like a really strong fit now, but it took quite a bit of massaging and getting to this idea where we felt really comfortable saying, yeah, this makes sense. On your point with community, this is a massive undertaking, as Isaac has kind of mentioned, and there's a number of organizations that we have supporting us and who are engaged on the project. The Alaskan Municipal League, Geostone Consulting, and Southeast Conference are all project partners for us. They're doing work in stakeholder engagement. They work in these communities. They're helping to make sure that we are engaging with everyone that should be engaged with, spanning from the general public all the way through government organizations and to the people working at local utilities. And then we have the need for support from those local utilities, as well as we have National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL, helping us with technical support on identifying what projects make sense and doing feasibility work. And then we have a number of technology vendors like VECKTA who are bringing the technology that allow us to build this platform that allows us to look at all these projects and evaluate them and think about a new way of developing projects in remote Alaska. And so it's a really Launch Alaska's role here is trying to help keep everyone moving in the same direction and making sure that we're talking about the project and that we're enabling all of our partners to get a lot of really exciting work done.
Yeah. Coach, manager, player. No, we're super proud to be a part of this, Matt and Isaac. And, we completely agree that the hardware and the capital, for the most part, like they exist in the market today. It's how do we as a team bring all the pieces together and make it easy, accessible, fast, and enduring. And I think we'd love to know, VECKTA will be one of the enabling technologies that helps bring all this together. What was it that attracted you to what we're building and our approach and mindset towards deploying these assets at scale?
So I don't know, Gareth, I think we probably met for the first time in 2017 or 18, somewhere in around there. I was at the time working for an equipment OEM selling energy storage and microgrid control systems. And then in 2021, I think you guys came through the tech deployment track program and started to work with Isaac and started to meet kind of others in the ecosystem in Alaska, and as well as at Launch Alaska as an organization. And it's really taken like 6-7 years to figure out where is the right opportunity for us to collaborate. It's because I think the desire has always been there. This project, this EnergyShed project, really kind of felt like a stars align almost in some sense of what VECKTA is interested in doing and focused on, and what the project needed. And, the ability of what you guys have built to look at a large variety of project options that are all clean energy focused, but otherwise different, to layer on optimization and feasibility study results to give insight and help stakeholders make informed decisions about what is worth doing. And then having at the end of that, this pathway to not just sourcing equipment, but also services and financing through the marketplace really kind of like captures the entire focus of the EnergyShed project. It was really a perfect fit. And then the last thing, which is not a core VECKTA offering, but it can't kind of go unmentioned, is there was a willingness and desire to integrate seamlessly with all the other technology vendors. And for Launch, whose obligation here is to deliver an easy to use, accessible kind of user experience, that was really important. And so the combination of having the right tech and working on all the pieces that we kind of need with the willingness to work with us was huge. This is where you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I think about it is this is really the same application for you guys mostly, except that instead of facilities, it's now communities that we're forcing you to. So maybe we're pushing you to think a little different, but a lot of it is pretty well aligned, I think.
Yeah, very well aligned. And what's exciting for us is actually that community aspect is Alaskan communities are the most in need today and have arguably the biggest to gain by doing this correctly. But we're seeing more and more communities all around the world realizing actually, if we continue to rely on utilities and be passive consumers of energy and not actually take direct control over our own destiny, then there are challenges with that. And so I think there's huge opportunities to prove this concept and create massive value for communities. And I think one of your partners, or one of our partners, NREL, I think they're famous for one of their studies that shows today, if you want to deploy one of these systems, between 30 and 70% of project costs are going to be in planning and consulting and engineering and procurement and contracts and negotiation and all this stuff that, to our point before, is just a precursor to the actual need, which is the deployment. And so what I'm most excited about is us collectively stripping all that soft cost out of this process and making it lean, mean, efficient, and creating massive value throughout the whole supply chain for everyone.
It's not just that we win when the projects happen, but inevitably some don't happen. And the fact that you don't have this massive burden cost of a thing that didn't get over the hump, maybe for very good technical or social or economic reasons, I think that's also really valuable and maybe not the part anyone wants to talk about because it's not deploying tech.
Yeah. The ultimate winner here, ideally, or I guess the intent is the communities. We've talked about a lot of the stakeholders that are coming together to make this happen. I'd love to get a better understanding of the local communities themselves. How does the program plan to collaborate with them? Whether it's the individual communities or the regional folks that you mentioned a moment ago, Isaac. Tell us a little bit more about that particular aspect, because this is really who's getting impacted, who's getting the benefit, reduced costs, and all the other factors.
Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, can I take that one, Isaac? I think you got called out on it, but I'm seeing nods. Yeah, I can speak to that for sure. So I guess I can name the 12 communities. We've only recently got to the point where we finalized on them. So to name the 12 communities, first time, here we go. In Northwest, we have Deering, Buckland, Kotzebue, Shugnak, Ambler, and Selawik. And then in Southeast, we have Hoona, Cape, Metlakatla, Angoon, Haines, and Yakutat. And, there's, as a project supported by DOE, there is significant obligation and expectation around diversity, equality, and inclusion. And so programmatically, as we thought through what EnergyShed looks like, we tried to build in checks almost for ourselves to make sure that we were accounting for those things and going about this the right way. So even right from the start, it was first picking a set of partners that regularly work in these communities and can help us to properly engage with all levels of a community. And then when it came to, selecting which communities are going to participate, we basically did an open call where we said any community leader can put in an expression of interest. And that's all you have to do is put your hand up and say, I'm potentially interested in this. And from there, we then went through a selection process to narrow down to our 6 in Northwest and 6 in Southeast, where we focused around which communities have the need and where can we have the greatest impact by bringing EnergyShed and this platform and the support that comes with it to deploy projects. Where is that most impactful is how we essentially landed on these communities. And as I said, some of them are very small communities. We're talking a couple hundred people. And that was really important for us. It's probably also worth mentioning that everything we do, and this is one of the things we talked about with you guys, is there has to be the opportunity for feedback and collaboration. And so we've pushed you to build features that allow for comment and discussion and delivery of feedback. And this is definitely new for you, I think, in your platform, but it was really important to make sure that we're engaging appropriately and leveraging ultimately what is a lot of local knowledge and things we just don't know. Nobody knows the power systems in these communities better than the utilities and operators who work there. Nobody understands better the implications of building a solar farm or a wind turbine in a location than the people who live in that community, or thinking about a hydro project than the people who fish and depend on fish in that community for their well-being. So it's really important kind of across the board that we're not just sitting here at our desks making decisions, but that we're engaging kind of as much as we can with the right stakeholders and all levels of stakeholders to make sure that as we propose projects and try to bring these funds in, that it's for the right things.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think our hope for this EnergyShed award is that it becomes a toolkit or a resource that communities can use after the project is finished. And I think that there's a dynamic here where many of these communities, they have done a lot of assessments and planning, and they have, comprehensive economic development studies published. They have done the hard work, oftentimes, of identifying what their needs are and what they hope for. And it is incumbent upon folks who have connections to resources and have, networks to respond to those needs in partnership with communities. But I think that is one nuance of this program, is that we are saying, rather than asking the communities to go through the hard work that they've already put in oftentimes in creating their plans and doing their needs assessment, we're saying, let's take that and let's work with the community leaders to actually deliver a project, rather than just asking the communities to go out again and do more planning and never see a project get done. And I think that's the hope, is that this project can suggest a set of tools and approaches where, communities who have put in that work of organizing and identifying where they want to go as a community can use these tools to get the nice things that they've asked for and get things built that actually make a real difference in people's lives. So,
that engagement and collaboration is a bit that I'm really excited about. I think in the business world, we see, in terms of trying to make decisions about deploying these projects, being how do you engage the finance person and the legal person, the procurement person, the ops person, and having everyone align around the game plan. I think, to your commentary both, is these communities, everyone needs to be involved in some degree in engaging, endorsing, approving, being a part of, being educated. And how do we make that process fun and seamless and interesting and actually get people excited about the value it brings? I think and then to your point, Isaac, how do we then leave it behind or continue to evolve it such that it becomes this educational platform and it builds, generational value and legacy? Super exciting. In terms of like the initial target is obviously 3 projects, at least 10 mil deployed. What do you see the future vision of this looking like? What's your sort of dream aspiration of where this could end up?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting into it a little bit in the last comments, but the reason that we're doing this, EnergyShed in some ways was built on some of our initial work in the community of Kotzebue, where we were helping them through a different funding mechanism and a different project identify a roadmap to 100% renewable energy in one community. Had some similar parts to it to this one. And then EnergyShed is now looking at how can we do something similar that results in real projects in, 12 communities, 3 projects, $10 million, between these 12 communities. I think you can see the trajectory here where we're hoping that if we're successful, that we could then look at using a similar set of tools. Maybe we can do 50 communities next. I mean, there's, over 250 microgrids in Alaska, independent, essentially islanded microgrids in Alaska. And I think it's fair to say that almost all of them have needs for updating their infrastructure, bringing down cost of energy. I don't think that that's an unfair assumption or statement to make. And so, yeah, I think the hope is that if we're successful, that we can replicate this and look at how do you do some kind of a statewide approach, or how do you even think about beyond Alaska. I mean, the interesting thing about some of the challenges that we see in Alaska, I have a background in Peace Corps and development in other countries. I think there are some similarities in terms of access to capital, projects that are logistically challenging, some technology risk. Sometimes there's political risk, and some of the projects that we're working on, I think, start to rhyme, or they start to have some resonance with projects in other parts of the world. I don't want to get too far out over our skis, as we say in Alaska, and start thinking too far ahead. But that is why we're doing this, is we're trying to find a solution to some really important problems that Alaska has, but then also that the other places in the globe have, and think about how we can have a bigger impact.
That's the kind of question where we get ourselves in trouble, because both Isaac and I want this to we want it to work so well that there's no question that others would want to adopt it. But then that's also a scary thing to try to promise to anyone, because it's not a simple problem to solve. But that's, I think, the goal for me is that at the end of this, if another community looked at it and looked at the framework and looked at the process and said, man, I want in on that, that seems like the obvious success for me. And there's so many communities, to Isaac's point, in Alaska and elsewhere, that this seems like it could work and that there's enough commonality.
One of the things that I think would be helpful for our listeners is to understand how this actually impacts the local community. So we've had renewable energy and clean energy mentioned a couple times, but can we quantify the cost that these communities, the cost pressure that they're currently under with diesel powered microgrids? And I've seen some of the figures and they're staggering. I mean, in the lower 48, even here in California, we have high energy costs, but I think that pales in comparison to what some of these communities are paying. And so what are the current realities? And then what does this unlock for them when the energy costs can come down?
Yeah, I mean, Matt probably has some actual numbers at his fingertips for cost across these communities, but paying upwards of 80 cents a kilowatt hour, Matt, is not rare. Even beyond that, I mean, whereas on the rail belt, the major population center in Alaska, we're paying around 21 cents per kilowatt hour for our electricity. And the reason this matters is that many households throughout Alaska are paying half of their household budget on just energy, and electricity is part of that. Actually, the heating is an even bigger part of that. So again, $10 per gallon of fuel is not uncommon. Again, looking at Matt to fact check me here, but that's within the right order of magnitude. And the reason this matters is that I think energy is special in terms of its impact on any potential for economic development. You really can't get out of the starting gates until you have access to affordable, reliable energy. And that's why this topic is so important. When you're spending half of your household budget on energy, you're not spending it on other things, education, improving, working on your home to make sure that your home is safe and secure and affordable. I mean, there just isn't money to do other things that would allow the economy to start flourishing. And so tackling energy is the base of any plans or any aspirations for economic development.
The thing I'll add on to that, so on the orders of magnitude, Isaac's bang on. And with EnergyShed, we're primarily tackling the electricity piece, but energy as a whole, meaning home heating, is still a huge part. The other kind of benefit, so there's obviously economic benefits, right? If you can deploy and generate at a lesser cost per kilowatt hour, there's a direct economic benefit that trickles down from the utility to which are in most cases co-ops, to the customers, which are the members. There's also a whole bunch of non-economic benefits that you can start to point to. And if you think about a small community that's entirely diesel powered, there's a noise element, there's an air pollution element, there's so much kind of logistic risk that you have to think about for places that maybe get fuel delivered once or twice a year. You're subject to ordering that fuel at the price point where it's at when it can be delivered to you. And well, it's up 18% this month. Nothing you can do about that because it's time to order for the barge to be able to deliver. Like, there's a lot of challenges that are unique to these places that really very few other places in the United States face. And so yes, there's economic reasons and a lot of benefit for everyone in these communities, but there's also a lot of other benefits, and energy independence is a huge one. To not be constrained on, I have one source of generation and I am stuck with this, and I have control over what energy in my community and a place that's important to me looks like, is a really powerful thing.
Yeah. For our listeners who are not up in Alaska, and this is a bit maybe unintended, a remote concept for them. I don't think it's too dissimilar to some of the things that we're seeing down here, though. While the prices may not be as high, Isaac, to your point, if a business is cutting into their profits by overspending, they could use that capital elsewhere in their business to improve the business. Similarly, the demand for electricity, even here in the lower 48, is far outpacing the ability to increase supply. And so having more energy independence and controlling not just the cost, but controlling your supply and ensuring that you can continue operations is a real concern or a growing concern that businesses need to be aware of. I'm curious, Matt, you come out of the OEM world prior to this, and curious any similarities that you see from working with commercial enterprises and communities.
There's some things which are similar and some things which are different, and that's not surprising. I think what I maybe want to highlight is that doing business in Alaska is different than, regardless of if it's with a business, a commercial entity, or a utility, or a community, is different than anywhere else I've ever worked, for sure. Relationships matter a lot. Network matters a lot. It takes time to build trust. there's going to be a justified, probably, degree of skepticism around new technologies, new organizations, new faces, new business models. And probably the thing that's constant, regardless, is what works. And that's, asking, and, maybe this is sales hat 101 in some sense, but like asking questions, listening and actually gleaning knowledge from those who were there long before you showed up, committing to being a partner that's there for a committed period of time, as opposed to a kind of fly by night, show up, drop your tech and disappear when the job's done sort of thing. Like, this is what really matters for doing business in Alaska. It's some of the things we talk about with tech companies that come up through our tech deployment track program, but it's absolutely true as well when we're thinking about projects and just doing business with a variety of stakeholders that we also operate that way.
Yeah, love it. Well, you're both extremely inspiring individuals. Love your vision, love the mission. Super excited to be partnering on EnergyShed. I know we're going to make a huge impact together. To round us out on a personal level, are there any resources that you really enjoy going to that our listeners should check out? Podcasts, newsletters, articles, something that inspires you or you get your content from?
I would maybe offer as a busy dad, I find myself, my proportion of content uptake has really shifted to podcasts and away from books. Unfortunately, I'm doing a lot of podcasting these days. But I really enjoyed in addition to this podcast, the Energy Transition show with Chris Nelder is just a great, just kind of should be required reading for folks that are in the energy sector, anyone that's working on energy transition. He has a kind of wonk or nerd rating or geek rating that he does for his episodes that, runs the gamut. But just love how he dives into topics, and it's really my go-to resource to understand at a deeper level beyond just kind of the talking points or the popular buzz, like what's actually going on with a wide array of topics all related to energy transition. So I would give Chris Nelder and his great podcast a shout out.
Nice.
Funny, as I sit here on this podcast, I'm not a huge podcast listener. That's not my general consumption form of media. Maybe I could talk about what I'm reading right now. It's actually an Isaac recommendation. I was telling him just yesterday. It's called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. It's the teachings and practice of a Buddhist monk, Zen and Zen master, and it's focused around relationship with the planet, our responsibility and role in taking care of it, and how we approach that in a way that, for how daunting it is maybe approachable. And I'm only halfway or maybe even less through, but it's got me thinking. And I think that's probably worth enough as a recommendation that I can sit here having not finished it and say, it's got me thinking about it. So maybe worth a read or worth a check out at least.
Awesome. Great shout outs. Well, thank you both for your leadership. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your partnership. Very excited to check in again on this podcast and share all the exciting updates as we go on this journey together. But let's get after it. Appreciate you both.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, and hope to see you both in Alaska soon.
Absolutely.
I love that.
All right.
Right on. Have a good one, guys.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.